good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever time zone you guys are all in. Welcome to the fireside chat about startups, venture capitals, and the Erlang ecosystem. We've got three panel guests here today, and we got a relatively open agenda. I've got a couple of softball questions to get things started as we get into this, but if you guys want to start asking questions, please feel free to, and we'll try and take it from there. So could I get you guys to introduce yourselves? I don't know how we've, maybe we should just start in alphabetical first name order. So that would be Jane.
Me first. Okay, my name's Jane Walerud.
Yep.
I now work with the family office. We join very, very early stage startups. I have a bit of a history with Erlang. I was the person who got it out of Erlang open source and helped start Bluetail and helped start Klarna. So been around for quite some time now, basically old person here. The next person.
So Rob.
Hi, I'm Rob Mee. I'm the CEO of a technology incubator called Geometer. We use pretty much Elixir for everything we do. That was founded in 2020. Prior to that, I was the founder and CEO of a company called Pivotal, which in a 30-year journey ended up with about 3,000 people and public on the New York Stock Exchange, and was then acquired by another public company called VMware at the end of 2019. And prior to that, I was a dishwasher.
Great. So William.
Hello, folks. My name is William King. I'm the CTO co-founder of Subspace. Subspace is fixing the internet for gamers, and we are using Elixir in thousands of locations globally in order to be able to shave milliseconds off so that gamers can actually have a good experience. And as my sweatshirt says, every millisecond counts. And I got started with Erlang actually coming from C. And so my first exposure to Erlang was through NIFs, trying to take some very strong libraries and bring them into distributed systems. And so I got to see the magic from that side of it.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for the intros. So it seems like we've probably got two of our panelists of being trying to attract money recently, and one of them seems to be in the business of donating money at the moment. So maybe we should ask the guys who've been, shilling for money recently, how relevant is it to actually talk about the Beam as a technology from your perspective? Do you think it's something that you actively use in your wooing for capital, or is it just sort of mostly incidental?
I can certainly opine on that a little bit. I say it's actually it's very important in one sense and not important in another sense. And what I mean by that is that as part of what we talk to investors about, and we have investors in Geometer itself. It's a bit unusual to have venture capital investors in an incubator, but there's a fair amount of interest. But we're also, of course, preparing to take investment in our startups as they mature. And one of the things that we do when we talk about why we have a differentiation of sorts is that we're using a technology that's really good at doing high scale, high concurrency applications. And when we say that very confidently, and some VCs, if they're technical, ask, what is it and why? And we can go into that. But the fact that we say it with confidence and that it's true is a real important differentiator for the kinds of spaces that we go into. They don't always know what it is, or the fact that it's Elixir or the Beam is not the thing. It's the fact that we have it and we're confident in using it.
I'd say I share a similar experience. more of the VCs that we talked about, since Subspace is a deep technology dealing with networking and major globally distributed systems, most of them don't really know about the Beam. They don't know about Erlang or Elixir. And when we go through and say, look, most of the internet routing already is running with Erlang through a lot of the routers that are running from Cisco and others. And when you look at major distributed systems and very, very high concurrent user counts, WhatsApp did an amazing thing. And as soon as we can point those pieces out and say, there are already great examples of organizations who have already solved these incredible global, hard, deep technology challenges, and we're just following in those footsteps so that we can implement our solutions to these hard, same challenges, it becomes a non-issue. It's like, okay, cool. That's new lessons learned.
Okay. So, and Jane, how do you perceive it from your side? Are you very targeted, or would you go off the reservation and invest in companies that are not using Beam technology?
Oh, I definitely invest nowadays in companies that don't do Beam technology. Family's working really only on climate change, and is actually dealing with atoms, would you believe it? So graphene companies and forestry companies, which are electrical rather than diesel, things like that. So we definitely do things that aren't Erlang. I would like to say that generally VCs would like to know that you're solving a problem that hurts, that somebody actually cares about what you're solving, and that if you can prove that, okay, that this is something that somebody actually cares about, a fair number of people, and when we solve it for them, they get very happy, and net promoter scores are high. Whatever, if it's B2B, if it's B2C, whatever, they really care, then you have a deal often, okay? And the fact that you have using good technology is something that people perhaps ask about when they're already quite interested in doing due diligence. You have to get in the door first and actually get a meeting with the VC. That's not so easy. And the next thing you have to do is say that, look, we know what we're doing. We have traction. Our customers love us. And we have this great plan for doing well. And then they might actually say, okay, we're interested enough to sign some documents and get into and start asking technical questions. Not before.
Right. So you're saying you definitely have to lead with sort of market need and what the customer potential is. There's no point.
I'm also a mentor in something called Creative Destruction Lab, which is build something massive and science-based. So if you're a technology in search of a business plan, they do an excellent job of helping companies do that. So there's people like the chairman of Twitter, the guy who invented Alexa, and many of us VCs who are there mentoring. And it's amazing. It's really just build something massive science-based. And if you don't really know what your go-to-market is, but you have something pretty cool and you think it's good, then apply there. It's free. Okay, it's spread over the world. It's absolutely amazing, and you do get those really amazing mentors. So Creative Destruction Lab, look it up.
Okay, but certainly that's not your go-to sort of question as soon as you start talking to people. Is what technology are you using, right? That's way down your laundry list. Yeah. So maybe back to William and Rob. So as you've been, I think William, you said for what you were doing, you're trying to shave, milliseconds off the gaming response time, right? Which is a laudable and understandable goal, right? So do people immediately go to, well, how are you making that happen? Or do they spend more time asking you about why do you want to make that happen? How quickly do you get into technology conversations, if at all?
I would actually say the first question we kind of get is usually, are you shaving single milliseconds off, or is it bigger than that? And we usually respond with, so we built our first network in about 75 calendar days, from nothing to production. And there was a lot of tooling for Elixir in the networking world that really helped us shave a huge amount of time in going into production and going and supporting hundreds of thousands of concurrent gamers. Many of those gamers were experiencing latencies of 120 to 180 milliseconds, and that dropped to about 35 milliseconds, 37 milliseconds for some cities. And so we had a night and day difference for a lot of gamers, and gamers are very passionate about it. If it doesn't work, they let everybody know it's not working. And when it does work, their friends let everybody else know that it works for somebody, but doesn't work for them. And so we started off very much on the, what's the customer value being delivered? What's the experience? Who are the businesses that we're supporting? Who are their customers? And then once people realized just how big of an impact that we could make, like how bad the internet was for real-time systems and how good it could actually be, then people got super curious. Well, aren't there 1,000 impossible problems you have to solve? And we started talking through distributed systems, concurrency, synchronization, resiliency. And a lot of those questions we were answering like, well, here's an example in the Erlang community that's already solved that one. We didn't have to use our, let's say, our 5 innovation tokens to solve that particular hard problem. We just had to engineer it and put it to work well.
Yeah, but you were selling a great customer. You were solving a big problem. Is that gamers don't like latency, right? That's a big problem that everybody understands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what we found is as we dug into it, we were solving latency so well that even like packet loss and all these other types of quality systems and denial of service protections, we started solving all of those too after we solved latency, because they became the biggest issue.
Mm. Yeah.
I think, from our perspective, there's a proposal, there's a proposition with Geometer and how it does incubation that is really dependent on having this technology there. And it becomes a compelling proposition to the investors. They really latch onto it. So let me explain what that is. It's something we call generative incubation. And by that, I really mean we change the process of ideation that normally works with incubators, where you come up with an idea and you market test it, or you have cohorts coming in, entrepreneurs applying to an incubator to be incubated and go with their idea. And we said, we're going to try something else, which is we implement a very modern, scalable version of the core functionality of a very large and very valuable existing system in the world today, in some technology domain. And we build that core and try to simulate what it would be like at scale, so that we can say, not only could we compete in this space and what would it cost us to do so, but we can also compress the discovery within a technology domain and generate a lot of ideas for potential startups to build. And having Elixir and the entire Erlang ecosystem backing that up is what allows us to do that, to build things fairly rapidly at scale and say, gosh, we could compete in this ecosystem, and look at all the places we could compete, especially because many of the other companies that are using things are having to implement all of these distributed system capabilities in, for example, Node or Python or whatever the heck they're using, and we can say this is a solved problem in the Erlang ecosystem, and we can stand on top of that and move quickly. And so again, we do explain what the technology gives us to investors, and they're interested in it, but they're more interested in the capability that it enables. They're fascinated by that.
Right, but I think both you and William then are making an argument about the fact that you believe it gives you a way of out executing your competition in the market, right? But the VCs probably hear that argument from everybody, right? I don't think I've ever met or been involved in sort of pitch conversations during my career when the folks that didn't come in had that belief. I personally believe that CEOs have to be to a certain extent highly optimistic in order to succeed at what they do, right? So they can be optimistic because they've got the right technology. They can be optimistic because they're sociopaths, right? How does the VC differentiate between, you know, those different categories, right? Do they have the wherewithal to do that, or are they just, is it a random process where, you know, you're persuading them that you're great and they give you some money, but when you think about it afterwards, you could have just been, you know, you could have been selling them, you know, Node.js, and they might have given you the money anyway.
Yeah, I think William made some really good points. Is that you can point to a number of things that are important things and very high scale things that have been done with this technology. I think I'm in a very fortunate position, having run a company for decades that worked on hundreds of startups in Silicon Valley and elsewhere. I know a lot of these VCs, so I don't necessarily have to get over that hump of, would you believe me if I told you something crazy like this? They're at least willing to give me a chance because they know me.
Right, which seems to be one of the primary choice things, right, is track record, right? So when you talk to VCs, it's very much, that's much more a discriminator as far as they're concerned than what technology have you done. So their questioning order would be like, show me your resume, before they say, show me your, you know, network stack.
No, right? It's more that you have to get the first round, the very first round of angels in. It's a really good idea if you can, and that's tough, but it's a really good idea if you can get somebody in there who does have Rob's kind of contacts with the VC community. So that you get the friends, families, and full stage includes somebody who is well connected, and that person can help you reach the next group of VCs. Okay? It's really fairly difficult to go from nothing to go into, to find a VC to invest when you're at Series A or something like that. You really, warm introductions are absolutely key. So the very first investments are actually quite important.
Yeah, and that was my experience as well. Okay. Especially in that early stage, a lot of the VCs look at the team and how does the team pass diligence. Does the tech community be able to talk to the team members and say, yes, these guys might not have the answer right now, but this is the team that could actually put it together and figure out the right answers when they have to. And could they actually execute fast enough to bring it to market at a time scale that would be effective?
Right, but again, that's a and I'm not sort of I'm playing devil's advocate here at the moment. That sort of VCs are looking for transitive properties of people and people skills. They're not necessarily asking transitive properties of which Git repos you're using, right?
Yeah, and I would say more than anything, VCs are focused on the CEO. And who are they and where do they come from and do they believe? I mean, a lot of VCs view their intrinsic value as being able to identify the next great entrepreneur or entrepreneurs, next great leaders of large technology companies. So so that part becomes very important, and how to give a new CEO credibility is one of the great challenges, I think.
Right. Right, it's a sort of you need to have your first success, and then it's sort of it's a lot easier after that type conversation.
No, it's not only that. Really, if you have the right CEO kind of persona, you still need that first group of investors to be the right investors who will give you help. Otherwise, you end up, maybe that's not true in Silicon Valley, but in a lot of places, you end up with the local Rotary Club who don't know VCs. It's not going to help you much, right? You're going to be based on your own thereafter. Whereas if you have somebody who is well connected to begin with, then miracles happen. I'm in the process of starting a company right now. I am not the CEO. I'm just the investor and sort of doing some work as well. And the CEO turns out to know VCs. And before we have any idea how much money we need, none, okay? Before we know anything, if we have any IP, no idea. Before we know even if the damn thing works, she's got offers of $30 million, just anything you do.
Right.
And that's her contact net. So over to Rob, okay? And if you weren't this person, but you were me, instead, which is not nearly as good, let me tell you, then it is the contact net more.
Right.
For the first investors who can help you define the next investors.
Okay.
And, who have
and William, that's your observation too?
Very, very much so. It's the first investors that you get connected with really make, or they set a floor of what's the next step. So the better the investors that you can get first, the better you can get in the next set of rounds, and the more awareness VCs in the investor community has for what you're doing. If you have to, like, that first couple of investors is a huge mountain of work. Some people have already done that work previously, so they've already paid that work tax effectively. But it's good investors can make it much, much easier for the follow-on. And we've
okay.
My co-founder and I had a very positive experience because we put in a huge amount of work up front early to help select some of the best angels initially and for our seed and follow-on rounds.
Okay. So I got a couple of questions here from the audience. So let me start off with the first one here. This is from Zaki M. And he said, we're a food tech startup with unicorn potential, leveraging Elixir, OTP, Phoenix, Nerves tech stack, building disruptive, highly concurrent and distributed planetary scale platform and supply chain around food. We want to understand where to connect with potential investors and VCs that apply and our tech stacks as a competitive advantage. Can you give us some advice? Not a hard question, guys.
No, food tech is generally impact tech, okay? There are lists of impact investors. The world is piling into impact, but sifted.eu has a great list of impact investors that they keep updated. You can also look at Blue Morpho. They have a really good, well-curated list of impact investors. And you can check if they do food tech or not. It's people, investors tend to specialize. So the people who do food tech are not the ones who are doing gaming, probably.
Right. Yeah, I think that's probably, well, I'm assuming that everybody thinks that that's relatively obvious, but it is worth iterating, reiterating as a point. So, William, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd second that as well. As we started this the panel, start with what's the impact and who's the customer and what's the value you're going to be providing to humans and to the systems that are supporting those people, and then work your way back from there. If you can make it super clear of the impact you're going to have and the market that you're going to be servicing, that will make it much easier to get those first introductions. Once you have those first introductions of like what was said for the impact investors, they'll be able to go through and say, oh, you have a competitive advantage on technology or this other logistical supply chain competitive advantage. They're going to be able to recognize who else you might want to go pull in, but start first with who you're going to be serving and the impact you're going to have for the people in the globe.
Okay. Thoughts, Rob?
Yeah, I agree with both of those positions on that. And I think, you know, the technology comes in when the technology capability comes in when the investors believe you're onto something. And if you're, you know, if you're getting some customers and you're showing that you have a solution that's really differentiated or is going to make an impact, and they say, gosh, this thing could be really big. How are you going to deal with that? Especially if you're, you know, relatively new, or you're a young startup, and you say, aha, we've got that handled, and here's why. And you can be really articulate about what you're, you know, what you're doing and why you can do the planetary scale. That's going to come in, but I don't think it's the first, the first topic of conversation that they're going to want to discuss.
Okay. So I have another question here from this one from Peter Ulrich. Which areas in which Elixir is already used are you most excited about? or do you see the most potential? Areas like health, networking, multimedia, etc. So maybe that's for you, Rob, at the moment. Going in reverse order.
Sure. Yes. We actually, while we're an incubator, we started just before COVID hit, and we said, global health emergency. We need to do something, and so we kind of put most of our work on the back burner and really focused on that. And there've been some folks from Geometer who actually talked about that. Eric Saxby gave a talk yesterday on that. But what we found is that our focus on Elixir and our use was very, very helpful in doing COVID response work. And so, I see it whenever we get into high concurrency, lots of data, lots of scale. In all of these ways, it really is something that we can rely on to build systems that are going to work. So yeah, I think in all of those areas.
Okay, Jane or William, any thoughts on that question? All of the above.
When you're trying to come up with ideas, if you're thinking, okay, think of different kinds of food and make a list, right? And then if you say, no, give me, and you run out of ideas after a while, most of us do, and you say, give me a list of white food. And suddenly you get much better at coming up with more foods that are white than just general foods. That's just the way our imagination works. So if you limit your product imagination to things that will work really well with Elixir, you're not going to get stuck in things. You're going to find out a whole bunch of ideas, honestly, that you wouldn't otherwise have. And you'll see the world in a way that will help you see ideas. When I found Klarna, there was 3 23-year-olds, and they had an idea that I could see was perfect for airline. Lots of small transactions that had to be accurate and had to work quickly, and yeah, perfect. I think that's what you use what you know, and then you look at the world through those glasses, and then you listen to people bitching about stuff. Okay. If people are bitching about it, then maybe there's a problem.
Yep. Okay, so I have another question here. This one from Fons, probably from a pronunciation perspective. So how do you answer when a VC investor funds argues the ecosystem of I'm assuming it's ample of experienced developers around Erlang is not as big as other tech things? So I think this is getting to the question of the gene pool for Beam developers is not as big as it needs to be. So is this a relevant question that you run into in hiring talent at the moment, or is that not a big issue when you've been looking for funding?
I can answer that one up front. I like to use, so we've got an amazing engineer at Subspace. Charlie had no background in Erlang or Elixir. And when we first went to go launch in production, he was able to get up to speed with Elixir and write a significant portion of the distributed system in the code base. He wasn't familiar with the patterns, but being able to show some of the examples that the Elixir and Erlang community was able to provide, especially around OTP, he was able to use those patterns to build systems far larger than anything he'd built previously. And I'd say for folks, when you're trying to recruit from the Erlang and Elixir community, yeah, it's not as big as some other communities, but the community has done really, really well to write up examples of how to solve particular types of patterns, both from the how to do it very, very quickly. How can you solve a pattern like this to prove out like same day? So if you're trying to prove, hey, how do we collect a form with some other features, put it into a database and be able to be interactive of it? I think the Elixir community has done well to be able to show how you can do that exact same day, as well as how do you move from that to now bring it up to a global scale production system in a smooth process. And so I see that as one of the superpowers of the Erlang Elixir communities is there is both of that. I've only seen that in one other community, and that's how Rust community operates.
Interesting that you mentioned that. Okay. Rob, your sense, is it a topic that VCs give you a hard time about? Skills?
No, I haven't had that question from any VCs. And I think if I did have that question, I think I would answer from many years of experience hiring at Pivotal and of course continuing into Geometer, which is we always want to hire for aptitude, and we pair. It's kind of part of how we work, which is a really great way to do high bandwidth knowledge transfer and education. That said, you do need, if you're expanding rapidly, you do need sort of that starter dough. You need some folks who are going to know some Elixir and compare with people and get them up to speed fast. So, it's not you can't dismiss it entirely, but I think part of what we want to do is to continue to expand the community and mint more Elixir developers, because one thing I can tell you is that people coming from Ruby or Java or Go or what have you are generally very, very excited to use and learn Elixir and discover all of these amazing things that the ecosystem can do. It's generally been very joyous and fun for the people that I've seen do it.
And Jane, any thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, this is the problem. This is the reason that Ericsson banned the use of Erlang 20 some years ago. There were not enough developers, and they did not see that there would be enough developers so they could actually use it. Okay, big scale projects. And Erlang and Elixir have become an enormous success, as William says. Most all of internet traffic touches Erlang and Elixir. Okay, but it's still true, because of this fast expansion, that there are a lot of jobs going unfilled for Erlang and Elixir developers. So there are people who, the idea is to say to good developers that, look, you've got incredibly interesting jobs available if you learn this new language, and it's a cool language, and you'll be very productive, and there are jobs around. It does require some persuasion. I think that on my impression, although who am I to know, is that people who are interested in Erlang and Elixir are actually better engineers. Okay, it's sort of a bit of a quality stamp, right? If you are that kind of a person, then you actually are a better engineer. You're probably more productive anyway. And then given the patterns and given the examples and given the powerful language, you become quite a good engineer, extremely good engineer. And that's something to do, but it's still a problem, I would say, because it's been such a success.
Yep. Okay, so I have a question here from, I don't know if I can pronounce the name correctly. It's Francesco somebody, whatever, some guy. He says, Jane's in Sweden, Rob is in Silicon Valley, and William moved his company from San Francisco to LA. So we don't like you for that, William. How important location, especially now that remote working has become the norm? So you guys got any thought about either the location of the company and or then remote working generally?
Subspace has engineers and employees all over the globe because we operate on a global scale. I would say I look first for strong engineers, even if they don't know Erlang or Elixir, but they know the distributed systems, they know a lot of the patterns, no matter where they're located. And then it's usually a later question of where are they located and what's the easiest way to support. I'm a big fan of remote work.
Okay.
I would say I'm a bit mixed on that. For Pivotal, for many years, we sort of expanded around the globe and worked in different cities. And for example, when we expanded into Singapore, I met with government officials and academics and industry people, and they said, well, you can open here, but you're never going to find the kind of talent that you found Silicon Valley. And I thought, well, that's a strange thing to say when you're sort of, recruiting us to come and open an office here. But I appreciated the honesty, but I didn't buy into it. My sense was that we were going to be able to find the kinds of people who were interested in doing the kinds of work we were doing, no matter where we went. And that did end up being true, whether it was in Dublin, Ireland, or Singapore, or London, or Atlanta. We always managed to attract people who were really interested in the kinds of things we were doing and the way we were working, even though we didn't really often use Elixir or Erlang at Pivotal. These days, I would probably say the same thing is true. And as Jane mentioned, I think the language and the ecosystem is indeed a filter for good engineers and people who are interested in working on the kinds of problems that you would attack. But now we have this remote situation, and we are now remote, even though I think the majority of us still live in the Bay Area in San Francisco. We do have people working in all sorts of different locations. And we make it work, and it's pretty effective. I'd rather be in person. I'd rather have our teams be co-located when they're working together. And so I can see that some hybrid model will probably use in the future. I don't want to give up the amazing people that we've hired in different locations. I don't want to give up the opportunity to hire more. But I also would love to see some co-location again someday. So I think we're going to try to make a hybrid model work, and I expect there are a lot of companies that are in that position.
Okay. Well, according to my watch, we're up from a time perspective. So if you guys have got any final observations or announcements, or want to reiterate the suggestions you had earlier on, I'd appreciate it. But then I think we'll call it done.
Absolutely. So I do want to call out that on my Zoom background here, I've got a URL and a code. Subspace is going to be opening up for a private beta later this summer. So if anybody has real-time usages on a global basis and they want to test out the world's fastest real-time network, go ahead and sign up. Tell us a little bit about your use case, and you'll probably hear from me soon.
Good marketing.
Yeah, that's super exciting, William. Expect some Geometer folks to sign up.
Looking forward to it.
Great.
I think that's it from me.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, Jane. Okay, thank you. So
Thanks for having us.
Appreciate the time and effort, and folks, reach out if you have questions offline. That's what the chat system's for. If you want to get clarity on any of the URLs or organizations that were called out, especially from Jane, see if you can put it in the chat. Thank you.